So, Vue.js 3 is officially out, and one of its biggest new features is the composition API. So let's see what it's all about. Hey everyone, Michael here. Welcome back to Dev Cafe. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Vue.js 3's latest composition API. A little disclaimer before we begin, this is not a Vue.js crash course. If you're watching this tutorial, I assume that you already have basic knowledge of Vue.js and you're simply looking to learn how to use the new composition API. With that said, let's jump right in. Okay, so what we have here is a super simple contacts app. The only thing it does is it goes out to a third-party API, grabs a whole bunch of contacts, and then displays them in these little cards. And the only thing you can really interact with is this search bar where you can simply search for a specific contact. So let's say I wanted to search for Carter Terry. I can just type in Terry, or I can type in Carter, and it'll find that contact for me. This is pretty much all the app does. I kept it super simple on purpose so that it is easy to grasp the concepts behind the new composition API. So taking a look in my Vue DevTools, what we see here is three main components. We have the app component, which is our main wrapper component. We have the contact header, which has this sort of a gradient with the title and the search bar. And then we have the individual contact cards, which take in a contact as a prop. Now, I built this little app using Vue.js 2's Options API, which is still compatible with Vue.js 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this app that I built using the Options API, and then we're going to take each of these components and refactor them into Vue.js 3 Composition API. Taking a look at the code here, what I have is this contact card, the contact header, as well as the main app.vue file, which are three components that I showed you in the DevTools. I also have this contacts service file, which simply makes a call to a third-party API at random user and grabs 50 random contacts. As usual, you can find the link to the source code down below in the description, so you can grab the files there and follow along with me. All right, so the first thing we see here in this contact card component are two computer properties, as well as a contact object that gets passed in as a prop. As you see, this is using the older Options API. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this whole computed section out, and I'm going to replace it with this new option that we get with Vue.js 3 called setup. Now it will take in a props object, and this setup option is where we do all of our computed property initialization. This is where we put methods, and it's also where we declare our reactive data. We need to somehow get our computed properties back in here so that we could use them in our template. So what I'm going to do here is import computed from Vue. Now, Vue.js 3 gives us this computed method, which we then could use in here and declare our full name. Now, this computed method will take in a callback method, and this callback method will return our computed string. I'm just going to take this from down below here and paste this in to save a few keystrokes. Now, the only thing I'm going to change here is instead of getting our contact through this, which is the older Options API way, we're going to use this props parameter and just change this over to props. And then we'll do the same thing here for the last name as well. And then we're going to do the same thing with the location. I'm going to grab this here, paste it in, put it into a string literal format and remove this and replace it with props, and we'll do the same thing here. As you see, I'm still not able to use them, and I'm getting an error from Vue saying that both of these variables that I created are not being used. So the way to make them available in the Vue template is we have to return them. So I'm going to return full name and location. And now my app is back to working again. So I've got my full name and location set up as computed properties. So that's how you declare computed properties. Now, it's probably not clear to you yet why this is a better way. So bear with me here, and hopefully it'll become more clear as I get into some of these other components. So next, well, let's take a look at the header component. And this is this gradient header with a search bar. Now, what's happening here is I have this data property called search query. And whenever a character is entered into this input field, I emit an event up my component tree, and my app.view component catches it here and then does a whole bunch of logic here to sort of filter out my the contact that I'm searching for. So let's take a look at, well, first let's get rid of this thing we commented out because we no longer need it. And next, let's take a look at this contact header. Now, similarly, I'm gonna comment all of this out. And what I'm gonna do here is import something called ref from Vue. Just like we did with the contact card component, I'm gonna create a setup method here, and it's gonna take in props. So the first thing I need to do is declare this search query reactive property. So what I can do here is I can do const search query equals ref. Anytime we declare a reactive property in Vue.js 3, we have to wrap it in this ref method to make it reactive. So I'm gonna just initialize it with a blank string. Just like with the other component, I'm gonna return this. So we're gonna say search query. And next is this method here. Now the way we do methods is actually quite nice. We just basically declare them as regular old functions. So we're gonna call it on search change. To emit something up, we'll have to pass in this new object in here, and I'm gonna grab emit. So I'll say emit search, and then we're gonna grab the search query value. So the way that this works is to grab the value of search query, which is we declared with something called ref, you have to not just call search query, but you also have to grab its value. So this is just the standard way of doing this in Vue 3. And we're also gonna make sure that we return this method from setup. So we're gonna do on search change so that we can use it in our template here. All right, so let's take a look to see if our app still works, and it does. Let me refresh. Let's do a hard refresh. Ah, looks like it does. Awesome. All right, so let's remove all of this commented out code. Next, let's take a look at our app.view. Now our app.view has this contact card, which we pass a bunch of, which we iterate through a whole bunch of contacts that we get, and then we pass them into this contact card. And here we have our search contact method that gets called when we emit an event up from contact header. So just like with the others, I'm going to comment out all of this. So let's collapse data, collapse computed, and comment all of this out. And let's also comment out this mounted method, because there is a different way to do lifecycle hooks in Vue 3. And then we're gonna comment out this methods section. All right, so we know the drill. Let's do setup. Now I'm gonna import a couple things here. So the first one is going to be that ref method from Vue. Next will be this computed method, which we used in our contact cart component. And then we're gonna do on mounted. And I'll show you what this one does in a little bit here. All right, so let's start with our reactive properties, I should say. So let's do const is loading, and we're gonna make it false. Oops, false. Next will be the contacts. We're gonna make this an empty array. And lastly, the search string, which will be just an empty string for now. Next, the search contact method. It will take in a query, and then we're gonna assign this query to search.value equals query. All right, so that's our method. We also have this async method called fetch contacts, which grabs a whole bunch of contacts from the API. So I'm gonna just copy this over to save a few keystrokes and paste that in here. And we're gonna uncomment this, and we're just gonna make it a regular old function. And then we're gonna replace this dot with just is loading equals true, because again, these are just regular old variables that you can call them without referring to the actual components. This. Now what this computed prop is going to be, so I'm going to again declare it as just a regular variable. And then we're going to use our computed method here, which will take in a callback. So like that. Let's see, what did I do here? All right, so it looks like I was just missing a closing bracket here. All right, so we have our filtered contacts, and the last thing that we need is this mounted. And so when the component mounts, we want to call this a sync fetch contacts method. Now the way we do lifecycle hooks here is it's no longer called mounted, except it is now called on mounted, and it's actually a method. So what we do is we say on mounted, and all we do here is we just pass in what we want to do. So we can say we can have a callback here, and this callback will call our fetch contacts method. So we'll say, and of course this is going to be a sync. Lastly, we're going to return all of these things. So first one is going to be is loading. Then we're gonna do contacts. Then I'm gonna do filtered contacts. All right, so now it's saying that search contact is defined but never used. All right, because we have to actually export it out. All right, oh, interesting. So it looks like these need to be declared as lets because we are changing them here. So I'm going to do a let on this as well. Okay, we're in the green. Let's check. To refresh the app. Cannot read property contacts of undefined. Oh, okay, that makes sense. It's because we don't need this anymore. And we also don't need that here on the search. Must use dot value. That makes sense. We have to use dot value. So this is really helpful actually, that it's giving me these little hints. All right, let's take a look to make sure this works. Huh, I wonder why. Oh, I don't know why. We forgot value here as well. This is one of those things that I think is gonna keep getting me, because coming from Vue.js 2, this is not something we had to do, because in the past we just had to do this dot is loading and then just set it. But now it's like is loading dot value. Just something to remember, I think. All right, so now our app is working and we're loading our contacts. And we can still filter, so we can do, let's say I wanted to search for Janice, and I can. Awesome. At this point, you're probably able to see some of the benefits that you get with this composition API. Like one of the benefits is that like these can be in any order I want. Like I could take this method and I could move it all the way down here if I want, or my onMounted can be like up here. So it really doesn't matter what order you put things in. Now this may not seem like a big deal for a small app like this, but if you have a super large app that has hundreds of components, and some of the components might be really long and have a lot of logic in them, it really helps to be able to organize your code in areas that have that common functionality. So for example, like my contacts, right? I don't have to declare it up here. I can declare it down here if I want. And now my fetch contacts and my contacts variable or my contacts property are all grouped together, which makes it a lot easier to, I think, to scan the component and see where some of this logic is happening. And the other thing you can do is you can use the composition API to share different logic between components. Let me show you what I mean. So what I have here is this fetch contacts method, right? And then we have this filtered contacts, and then it's populating our contacts. Basically what I can do is I can take this logic and I can move it into a separate JavaScript file and then import that file into components where I want that functionality. So let's create a new folder here, and I'm going to call it hooks. The reason I'm calling it hooks is because I'm kind of borrowing this from React a little bit. React has very similar approach to their hooks, and so I'm just going to borrow because, borrowing is fun. All right, let's create a new file, and let's call it usecontacts.js. Now what I'm going to do here is I am going to do some copy and pasting from here. So let's grab all of this, and we're going to actually cut it from here. Paste that in. So we'll export a function out of this file. So we'll do export default function, and we're going to call this function useContacts. Now inside of here we are going to have pretty much all of this. So we're going to take this, this, actually we're going to take all of this, and we're going to move it into here, and then we're going to return from this method is loading filtered contacts. as well as search. The only thing we're going to keep, I think, in the other component is this search method. We don't have to, but I feel like it kind of applies only to this component and this component only, so I'm going to keep it here. So let's save this. Next, we'll import use contacts from hooks. Use contact. Is it contact or contacts? Use contacts. Okay, we just called the file use contact. That's fine. So what we're going to do here is we'll say const. Now we still need all of these things to be available to our template. So I'm going to say const. We're going to say is loading, right? Because that's what that method exports. Search and filtered contacts. And then we're going to say use contacts. So we're going to grab all of those things from there. Oh, that makes sense. Relative module not found because our paths are different now. So we're going to need to do that. Contacts is not defined because we no longer need contacts in here because we already have filtered contacts, which is just a computed property for contacts. Okay, let's take a look. All right, it still works. So I can still do my searches. So I can do Barry. Let's do like Spencer. Awesome. Everything is working. So as you see, what we did here is we basically took some of this functionality for fetching contacts, setting our loading state, populating this contacts property, and then the search query, I should say. And we basically took it, or we exported it out into a different JavaScript file because it's just regular old JavaScript. And this is one of the powerful things about the new composition API is you can pass views reactive properties around different components. And it made our component, our app.js component, a lot smaller because we no longer have those methods. And the best part is if we have to use, we have to grab our contacts and do a similar type of thing and do a search in another part of the application. Let's say we built this application to have different views. Well, all I have to do is just import this use contacts, and now I have that functionality here. Now, you could kind of do this with mixins and the current options API, but the main difference with mixins is that you could run into name collisions because with mixins, you have to still have that data property on there, and if you have anything in your component that has the same name that the mixin, it'll actually override it. You won't have that problem here because you're explicitly declaring these names. And so these names are just references to what is inside of this use contacts. And you will not be able to declare anything else with the same name here because you've already declared this constant. So this is one of the advantages you get. I think it makes the code a little bit easier to read. And the other thing is, I think you really start to see the benefit of this if you have a very large application with hundreds of components. So you can then sort of share a lot of logic because that's naturally what happens in these large enterprise applications is you're going to have a lot of components that have very similar logic or they're sharing a lot of the same type of functionality. And so creating these hooks, as I call them, by taking logic out of components and putting them into a separate JavaScript file and then just importing that into components, I think is going to give your code base, I think it's going to make your code base a lot cleaner. That's it for this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section down below. And then don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video because it really helps the channel out. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.